In global news, Germany's Conservative Party won the country's general election over the weekend. Friedrich Merz is set to become the next chancellor. He's going to begin talks this week to form a coalition government. Joining us right now is Meghan O'Sullivan, the director of Harvard's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. She served in both Democratic and Republican administrations, including as Deputy National Secretary Advisor in the George W. Bush administration. And Meghan, thank you for being here. Just taking a look at these elections in Germany, probably not the biggest news that the Conservative Party won, but that the far-right party actually picked up about 20% of the vote and a very wide turnout of about 84% of the possible voters turning out for this vote. What does this mean? What's the sea change here?
Sure. Good morning, Becky. Well, as you said, this is definitely a step in the direction to the right for the German electorate, with the Alternative for Germany, the AfD, that you mentioned, receiving 20% of the votes, which is not just a large amount in an absolute sense, but this is a doubling of the votes that they received just 4 years ago. And I think it's a reflection of something we've seen in other countries, in the United States as well, is a dissatisfaction with the government around issues not only related to the economy, but very much related to immigration. I was in Munich just a few weeks ago, and certainly you heard the dissatisfaction of more than 3.5 million refugees from Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria having come into Germany, and many Germans feeling that they haven't been well integrated and that they're keeping certain services and security from Germans who have lived there for decades.
How does this play out? Because while they may not be able to be in power at this point, they may not make any decisions because none of the other parties will work with them at this point, they are going to move the national discourse and change how Germany does things.
I think it's correct to say that they've definitely, and their success has shed a light not just on these particular issues, but also on the polarization within German politics, particularly between East Germany and West Germany, where in East Germany you had a very strong showing for this party that we're discussing. On the whole, though, at least with the polls that are coming out, the exit polls that are coming out today, it looks as though Friedrich Merz and the Christian Democratic Union and the Socialist Democratic Union will be able to form a government without too many other parties. And that will make for a more stable coalition, actually, than was had in the previous government that created a lot of uncertainty and a lot of paralysis. So in some ways, the good news for the conservatives and for German politics as a whole, and Germans who wanted a more stable government, is that the election results, while definitely revealing the rise in support for this far-right party, also produced a result that I think there's some hope for a more stable government, which is what Germans need, particularly as the presidency of Donald Trump presents very new challenges to Germany and to Europe as a whole, and particularly as it relates to Ukraine, but also trade.
Let's talk about the Ukraine angle first on this. We know that this government is likely to spend more on defense in particular. They're going to have to pick up some of the check that the United States is no longer going to be picking up, the tab for what it comes to Ukraine. How does this change? Where do things stand right now, particularly with the negotiations that are taking place between the United States and Ukraine?
Germany, but Europe as a whole, I would say, is in a very serious moment of despair and hopefully galvanization, in the sense that they need to, I should have said, they should be galvanized to support Ukraine, but also their own independence and their own military. In fact, the person you mentioned, Friedrich Merz, who's most likely or almost certainly to become chancellor, said just today that his top priority is to be reinforcing European strength so that Europe can gradually move away from its dependence on the United States. This is frontmost in the minds of European leaders, but it won't be easy because for decades, as we know, the Europeans have been very reliant on the U.S. for their collective defense. It's not that Europe has not contributed to Ukraine, and in fact, Europe has spent $65 billion collectively on Ukraine's defense, whereas the United States has spent $67 billion. So there has been a big contribution, but it will be very hard for Europe not only to replace the United States and Ukraine. I think that will be extremely difficult. But to provide more of its own security, it will need to do incredibly hard things. One study said that Europeans will need to mobilize another 300,000 Europeans for the defense of Europe in the possibility of a conflict with Russia. We'll need to spend more than about 3.5% of its GDP on defense. These are very tall orders at a time when the continent is struggling economically as well. So these are going to be some of the priorities for Chancellor, or soon to be Chancellor Merz, and a German government, as well as its European allies.